everybody, what the flick? William Bibbiani here with Francis Maxwell. Alonzo is out for reasons unknown or unremembered.
Oh, that sounds nice.
He'll be back again soon. We're reviewing The Flash, episode 19.
Yep.
Who is Harrison Wells? Is it Mr. Garrison, Officer Bob Brady? Let's take a look.
Dr. McGee said that after the accident, Wells became a completely different person. It's because he is a different person.
This body is the real Harrison Wells.
Payback time.
It's hard to wrap your head around this.
This isn't possible. I'm gonna need to see some proof.
Proof? Proof of what?
The Flash, all new this Tuesday at 8/7 Central on the CW.
This episode dramatically is very, very tricky because the audience already knows all of this stuff. And we're just waiting for the cast to catch up.
Yeah.
And we're waiting to see how Harrison Wells is going to react or find out or not find out. It can potentially be rather boring to see them play catch up. What did you think? How did you think it played out?
It's 1,000 times better than last week's episode.
Oh, yeah?
I must say.
And you were harsh on last week's episode.
Yes,
You didn't like the whole
I just
B
didn't
thing.
like the whole B thing. And
Yeah.
the shapeshifters, as much as I like it, I just have seen it in Smallville, and I expected it to come to that point. But I did like the episode, and I loved the dramatics around Harrison Wells, because although we do know the background story, I liked seeing how Kaitlin started to identify what was going on, and how Cisco finally understood what the problem was, that this was someone else's body in someone else taking over Harrison Wells' body. And I think that it was good to see how those characters reacted to it. We know that Kaitlin didn't exactly like it at first.
Oh, she articulates it very, very well. If he is evil, then her last years of her life are a lie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I must stress, whilst we're on here talking, that I am just fresh from the dentist, so I'm a little droopy mouth, but I'm going to try and pile through because we want to talk about it. But,
Yes.
but I do...
You're looking good.
Yeah, I'm trying to. On this side, I look all right.
Get him on this side. We're
Get
good.
on it. We'll just keep him on my good side.
There you go.
There was a couple of questions I wanted to ask you about.
Yeah.
So how many episodes have we got left? I think we've got 2 or 3.
We got like 3 or 4 actually, because
3 or 4?
there's one more episode and then there's another one with Grodd in the title. So yay!
Yeah.
And then I think a couple more. So we got a little while.
I loved Kaitlin and Barry. Well, Kaitlin thinking it was actually Barry, but it was a shapeshifter kissing her, and then her awkward reactions after it were hilarious.
So cute.
But it led me to the idea: is she got feelings, or has she got feelings of Barry? That's why this.
I think so. I think they've toyed with this a little bit before, right before the Firestorm episodes, and then that sort of kicked that subplot back into the background a bit. Certainly, there's an attraction, whether or not there's more than that. I think sometimes I feel like shows throw subplots or storylines or even episodes like this in just to get people in the audience shipping. I think people who want to see Kaitlin and Barry get together should be called Snowberries. Snowberries, if you will. But it's interesting to me because I've noticed there's a weird sensation, there's a weird sort of inkling in the human mind where we see 2 people who seem good together and we want them to get together.
Yeah.
Why is that's pure empathy? There's no reason. We have nothing invested in this unless we're really voyeuristic and just want to watch 2 hot people make out, which admittedly a lot of us are. But it's interesting to me that we can get so much invested off of one scene where someone is impersonating Barry, trying to put the moves on Kaitlin, and she's kind of going for it, which means she always kind of wanted him to. But dramatically, it works very, very well because Kaitlin isn't willing to accept the possibility that Harrison Wells might be lying to her. Yeah. And here we've got, right in front of her is the evidence where all you need is someone who looks like someone you can trust, telling you what you want to hear, and you will completely ignore any warning signs. And that's good. That's a good way to incorporate the villain of the week to the main story.
Yeah, I did have my questions around how the officer in Starling City allowed him to just basically take this case, even though it's in his jurisdiction. I understand it plays well with the story. But
we just have to kind of move on.
It's like, we owe each other a couple of favors, so we'll just let this dead body pass in my jurisdiction. But it led to a good storyline, and it led to the fact that now, that when you're looking at Cisco and... Why am I blanking? No, Cisco and...
Wells. Oh, Black Canary. Black Canary?
It was just blank and Black Canary. Like, that was another scene.
Oh, that scene was adorable.
Another scene that it was like literally like me if I went to like Comic-Con cosplay, seeing someone and seeing one of the characters. That's the way I would react. And Cisco is just so personable to the audience. He is everyone who's watching this show. He encompasses that, and
he's the target demographic. The way that they've been crossing over between Arrow and The Flash lately, when the first time they did it was really a big event. Last week on The Flash, it was a big deal. The last couple episodes of Arrow and now The Flash have done it in much more subtle ways. There was, in the previous episode of Arrow, which we don't review, I know we don't review it, I'm sorry we don't review it, no one else watches that show but me, in the What the Flick community. But they actually had to drop off a metahuman in the Star Labs jail. And even the Atom even just says, how do they eat?
Yeah, exactly.
Do they have a toilet? And they just don't answer the question. But at least they've heard our cries, which I really appreciate. So we've done that, and now we're seeing them go to Starling City and incorporate. And it's interesting because it's difficult to tell exactly where in the last couple episodes of Arrow this takes place. Because the relationship between these characters, the father and daughter, is kind of really volatile right now. She hid something really dark and terrible from him, but they brought it into a good point. It's like, okay, so she did something really, really bad. Don't you still love her? Yeah, I do. Okay, fine.
What worked well is, like, I haven't watched the Arrow and I wasn't familiar with this character, but I was still able to watch the episode and have it flow naturally without knowing the background story of it. And I think that they did that. It was much better than last week's episode because last week they hyped it up as if you were going to get the full Avengers cast, and it was like the all-star team up, and then you get Adam, who I'm a big fan of him in the comics, and he doesn't even shrink.
I know,
I was like, all right, so it was a little bit of a letdown, but this episode it played a lot better to introduce the Black Canary because Cisco acted like I was at the moment. I was like, oh, there's a Black Canary. Finally met her. I want a picture with her.
No, it's good. And she's been so dour on Arrow for a while now that seeing her lighten up a bit was a real treat. Seeing the Flash come over to Arrow and lighten it up a bit is really good because Arrow is on a real downer. It's actually getting better this season, but like it's been on a real downer kick in terms of the story lately.
So what was your views on the antagonist in this episode?
The antagonist,
what was his name they gave him?
They gave him Everyman.
Everyman
was the idea. And I like him. I like the idea of the Everyman. I like that he forgot what he looks like. I thought that was something that I've heard that toyed with before in shape-shifting stories, but it had a nice little twinge of tragedy to it right at the end. But my thing with the Everyman is obviously it's there to sort of thematically tie into the whole who is Harrison Wells shtick. But I just don't understand how Barry can like heal a broken arm in like minutes or an hour, and a knock on the head is really going to do that much to him. I just feel like, Barry, where are those reflexes? You're super fast. Like how did that it seemed like a bit of a cheat to me, but whatever, I will let it go.
But what I do like about, and I'm going to bring up Smallville again, is because what it does is it poses a natural environment for these characters to go outside their boundaries. So like, and see what they would react to if someone like Barry tried to make out with Kaitlin. How would she react? If someone like Eddie, I'm losing my mind on this.
Okay.
What if Eddie decides to go outside of his comfort zone? How will people react to this? And that's what I liked about the Shapeshifter story. It was a much better filler villain than last week.
I know.
I have to say that.
And Eddie, honestly, we don't talk about Eddie enough on this show. He's great, actually. Now that they've actually brought him into the fold, he's not just this like guy who may or may not be a competitor. He's a much more interesting character. His selflessness in this episode was really quite touching, and yet a part of me is just like, oh Jesus, they're either going to kill him or make him turn evil. It's one or the other. He's way too awesome. Like something terrible is going to happen.
Given the opportunity to leave, like Barry took him from his prison and we're like, all right, we'll just go and we'll figure out. No, I don't want to be made to seem guilty. He was very.
It's great.
Yeah, and with him and Iris, what I didn't get right is that. When pushed to the certain stage that she thinks that he might go to jail, that's when she suddenly like reevaluates her thoughts on the whole issue.
Tragedy can refocus all of our priorities.
But could Eddie have not just realized that telling her working with the Flash would be the answer rather than telling her who the Flash is? Because when he said that, she seemed to be like, oh, now it makes sense. And then everything kind of fell back into place.
You know, it was a compromise.
It seemed what are you going to do? It seemed like he could have said that. That could have been easily thought of in the previous episode.
Yeah, I honestly don't know why this show has some really stupid solutions to really simple problems.
Yeah.
Lightning psychosis, again.
I think we brought that up in every single review
and
because it deserves
still
to be.
Stupid. Like, I love the show. There's a goofy Silver Age charm to it that befits lightning psychosis, but it's also really dumb.
Yeah.
So when they actually have an organic, like, obvious solution that makes a lot of sense, it's like, oh yeah. Yeah, why don't we do stuff like that all the time? You know, like whatever. Anyway, it's a fun episode, but again, I feel like we're as I mentioned at the beginning, we're waiting for the cast to catch up. We're waiting for the story. Because in some ways, this isn't a filler episode. This is a necessary episode dramatically for the characters in the show to get where they need to go in order to confront Harrison Wells. But it can be a little dry.
It wasn't like a filler episode. It was more like the filler villain in this episode was better. But what the filler villain in this episode did is it didn't take me away from the main storyline. I felt like the B story, I was still wanting to focus on the issue around Harrison Wells and what they were doing with that. Whereas in this episode, it just gave me enough to keep the episode flowing.
Well, you know, sometimes it seems like a frustrating coincidence when the villain of the week just happens to key into whatever theme is going on in the show. But when it's done organically, like it is here, it's not distracting. It really only keys in if you think about it for a second. It feels pretty natural otherwise. And when it's completely random, like the bee. It is. It didn't bother me as much as it did you, but it was pretty non sequitur and silly.
But what happened in this episode as well is that Harrison Wells was more directly involved with coming up with a solution to the problem, and that's what makes it better because Kaitlin, then basically her perspective is backed up because she's like, he keeps helping you, he keeps saving your life, he keeps solving these issues. Why is he bad? And that's what rather than in the V episode, it wasn't. It was more like Cisco trying to figure out how we can try and dismantle these little robots. And that's why I feel like this episode was better because Harrison Wells was directly involved with the solving of the crime, making the audience more relatable to him still and making us think that he could have a good side to him, but we don't know. We still have to figure it out.
We still have to figure it out, and they still have to figure it out. Great cliffhanger this episode. They find Harrison Wells' secret room of mystery. And we'll find out more about that next week, I hope. And we will be back next week with more reviews of The Flash.
With my mouth normal and Alonzo back, I'm sure.
I certainly hope so. Yeah, so we'll see you there.